I have to tell you guys a story that I have been working on figuring out how to tell for years. It may be a lot for some people to take. It may be triggering. It's very intense. But you have been watching me live in my happy ending for almost 4 years now, over 4 years. And I just want you to know what it took to get me here, because the redemption story is truly powerful. So I've realized that the only way to get this out is to just start. When I was 23 years old, I was living in Atlanta, and a man who met me through a friend that I trusted deeply coerced me into working for him. Told me that he was a life coach. Told me that if I committed to being coached by him for a certain amount of time, he would be able to get me connected in the music industry because I wanted to be a recording artist, and convinced me to work for him with my friend, which is why I continued to trust him. We were working in a department store. He used me to recruit many more girls to join his cause, and eventually convinced me to move into a hotel with him and a bunch of other girls and leave my apartment. He said that I was joining boot camp and he needed me to be with him 24/7 in order to be able to train me to fulfill my purpose and to be everything that God had called me to be. So he convinced me to give up my entire life, my apartment, my job. He gradually encouraged me and the other girls not to talk to our families any more than we had to in order for them to believe that we were safe and okay. He said that we needed to focus on our mission and focus on becoming the businesswomen that he was training us to be. And so we needed to limit our time talking to our families because they would distract us and they wouldn't understand the mission that we were on. He convinced us to use the money that we were making to lease very expensive apartments, to purchase very expensive vehicles, tons and tons of expensive clothes, to go on long trips and stay in hotels and eat lots of expensive food, always saying that we were using all of these things in order to present ourselves correctly to the public so that we could connect with powerful people, because that was how we were going to make it big. He always had plans for how we were going to start these companies, or we were going to start working with these famous people and we were going to make tons of money. We did make a lot of money, but he always had these extended plans and visions that he would build in our minds of how we were going to make a lot more money and pay off all of our debts and be millionaires and live together and use each other and our team to build this legacy. And then we were going to use all the money that we made to go back and bless our families back home. He had a very good life off of our money and controlled how we spent every penny. Most of it would go towards our corporate expenses, is what he called all of the expenses, that like the houses and the cars and all of that stuff. And then whatever was left we would have, we could do whatever we wanted with, but it was never very much left over. He used God to motivate us to do all these things and to inspire us, saying that we were learning to walk in the fullness of God and that we were going to become mature Christians and do everything that God had called us to do. So he would have us start in the morning like praying in tongues. He would have us watch tons of sermons by online pastors and speakers and then talk about what we learned. And we did that every single day. Oftentimes we would watch 3, 4, 5 pastors or speakers in a day and talk about what we had learned. So we really felt like we were being trained spiritually. He had us get very expensive gym memberships and made sure that we were working out all the time. We were going to be our absolute best in every area of life, physically, mentally, spiritually. He excused gaslighting and verbal abuse and psychological abuse by saying that he was teaching us to be mentally tough, and that in life we were going to meet a lot of difficult people and we were going to need to know how to handle them. So he used sleep deprivation. He would let us get maximum 5 hours of sleep a night, a lot of times less than that. And if he found a reason to punish us for something that we had done wrong or for not hitting our sales goals that day, he might wake us up in the middle of the night in a rage, which was part of what he said was his training of us, and keep us up to do like memorizing of numbers for the business that we were operating or whatever else he could come up with. He sexually abused, and he would say, I need to do better in this area. Could you please pray for me? I, being a very innocent and naive, I was completely wrapped up in the whole thing. I was totally brainwashed, and I believed that he had my best intentions at heart always, and that he was doing all this because he loved me, and that any favors that I did for him sexually or otherwise was because I was giving him back what he deserved for how he was sacrificing for me. There were so many of us always together that he used us to help each other to believe in the reality of the situation. So I'm not sure exactly what it would be labeled. I know that it resembled a cult. I know that many years later I realized that the definition of labor trafficking actually seemed to fit the experience. I didn't know any of those things until I got out. I just thought that it was a very intense person who had some weaknesses, but overall was like this great godly leader who was leading me to be great. I was in that situation for 10 years, and it took me until the last few years to even realize that there was something wrong. And I finally started to understand that he was never going to fulfill the promises that he'd made to me. But what's amazing is how I did get out. And that is literally because God started showing me who I was. This man had completely robbed me of my identity. The gaslighting and the trauma bonding and psychological torture that he put me through caused me to completely lose any shard of identity that I had ever had. And I only believed that I was who he said I was. And I hated myself, and I was looking for answers, and I started journaling with God, and I started writing down my questions like, God, what do you see when you see me? What do you think of when you think of me? And what I was hearing God saying was the opposite of what this man was saying about me. He was saying, you delight me, and you are so amazing to me, and you have no idea what I have planned for you. You please me. Like, there was nothing left that I could do to please this man, because in the beginning, he told me all of these things that were wonderful about me. And then once he got me trapped, he began to tell me that everything was wrong with me and that I needed him in order to become a better person because I was a mess. And then I started journaling with God many, many years down the road, and God was telling me the opposite of what this man was telling me. And I was like, if God really sees me this way, then there's something wrong with what I'm believing. And then I started listening to this sermon that my pastor back home had taught, and he was saying how when Jesus died for me, he literally perfected my spirit, and the sin nature died when I believed in Jesus, and I was born with an entirely new nature that was now righteous and pure and holy. And I just needed to spend the rest of my life teaching my body and my soul to understand that I had been perfected. I hadn't heard it before, but it was right there in the scripture, and he was pointing out the verses and what the original Greek said that meant this. And I thought to myself, if this is true about me, then everything this man is telling me about myself is a lie. And all of the things I hate about myself are not part of me, and I can lay them down, and I can take up this perfection that Jesus won for me. So I began to do that. I began to say, even when I would yell at the other girls and when they did not like me, because I was not a nice person to them, and every time that I would act to them in a way that I wasn't proud of, I wasn't excusing what I was doing, but I was like, I don't know how this works, but I know that the way I'm acting is not who I am. And I actually started to believe that that was true, and it started to change me. It started to change something deep inside of me, and I started to look at myself differently, and I started to act differently, and I started to be someone that other people wanted to be around again. Ever so slowly, I started to turn into everything that I had always believed that I could be, but didn't understand why I couldn't attain to it. And the more that I began to walk in this new nature, the more I began to realize that everything that this man was saying to me was a lie, and that He didn't have an understanding of his own identity, and therefore he could never take me where I wanted to go. And I began to be able to distance myself from the control that he had on my mind. And it's a much longer story than I'm making it right now, but eventually, when I had the opportunity because of the pandemic, I was actually able to walk away from him and walk into a new life with people who absolutely love me unconditionally, would lay down their lives for me. And then I met the love of my life. My husband is the most pure form of love that I have ever experienced. He is literally this miracle that God gave to me to undo everything that was done to me in those 10 years of abuse. I cannot express to you how perfectly he has unraveled all of the lies that were built into my brain, all of the ways that this man insidiously eroded everything that I was, and taught me to be afraid, and taught me to be insecure, and taught me that there was no such thing as true love, and that everybody has an angle and everybody has an agenda. My husband has undone all of those lies and shown me that it is possible to be loved exactly as I am, exactly for who I am. And he has utterly changed my life. I have so many stories of how God has reversed all of the things that were done to me, but I felt like I needed to have this like baseline video to share kind of a very broad overview of what happened. It was nothing but the absolute unconditional love of Father God that brought me out of it and showed me that there was a better way.